He raised his hand with the right answer. Again, and the teacher slammed the marker down, saying, "Maybe if you followed the rules like the rest, you'd actually belong here." The whole class laughed. He didn't, because deep down he knew something they didn't. His method wasn't just correct, it solved a problem even the textbook got wrong. That afternoon, he was sent to the principal's office for academic disruption. But what happened next? It wasn't detention. It was national news. And the person who exposed the truth wasn't even in the room. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where are you watching from. Share in the comments below. A gifted black teenager gets labeled disruptive for solving math problems faster than his white peers. The late bell rang through the tiled halls of Redwood High School, echoing like a warning through room 207. Mr. Connor adjusted his navy blue tie and clicked his whiteboard marker with a rehearsed smile. The day's lesson was standard, algebraic expressions with variables on both sides, nothing special. But to Javion Carter, seated in the third row, right under the flickering overhead light, this was child's play. Javion was 16, sharp-eyed and soft-spoken, with a habit of working ahead in his notebook, long before instructions were finished. His spiral-bound math book was already worn at the corners, filled with tiny annotations and shortcuts he'd created himself. But in this classroom, speed was a threat, not a skill. "Who can simplify this?" Mr. Connor wrote the equation across the board slowly, with perfect symmetry. 3 buys 4 were. Javion had the answer before the marker left the board. His hand shot up out of instinct. Mr. Connor scanned the room and frowned. "Let's give someone else a chance today." He turned to the rows of students, then deliberately picked Trevor Banks, a varsity lacrosse player with a GPA Javion could probably calculate from memory. Trevor gave it a shot, stammering through the subtraction before settling on XE11. Javion flinched slightly. That wasn't even close. Mr. Connor didn't correct him. Instead, he offered a polite nod. "Not quite. Let's try someone else." Javion raised his hand again. Still ignored. He whispered the correct answer to himself. XE11, then quickly scratched out a different version on his own page using his unique shortcut. He boxed it in, double-checked his steps, and leaned back. The girl next to him, Elsie, leaned over. "You already solved the next one." Javion nodded, but kept quiet. He had learned not to say too much in math class. It always led to problems. When the bell rang for lunch, Mr. Connor stopped him at the door. "You're working ahead again, huh?" His voice carried a controlled tone, like a manager hiding annoyance with a customer. Javion nodded. "Yeah, it just makes sense to me. I like seeing if there's a fast." "You know what it looks like, Javion," Mr. Connor interrupted. "It looks like you're trying to show off." Javion's throat tightened. "I'm just solving." "Well, stop that. In here, we go together. You rushing through it only distracts the others." He didn't argue, but something inside him coiled tight. Was it really a crime to be fast? The next day, the lesson moved to linear equations, with multiple variables. Mr. Connor started writing out a problem, something far more complicated than the day before. As he turned to face the class, he said, almost casually, "Let's see who really understands this." He paused. His eyes locked onto Javion. "Javion," he said, "why don't you come up and show us how you'd solve this one?" It felt like a setup. But Javion stood, cautious but calm. He stepped to the board, took the marker, and read the equation. 4 2x, 1 3x. His hands moved fast, translating thoughts to math with a kind of rhythm. Within seconds, he wrote his first steps. 8 plus 3x the 2x. 3y. He paused to check. Then 5 buys 3x, 2 buys e11. He underlined the answer twice, then stepped back. For a second, the room was silent. Then came the laugh. Mr. Connor tilted his head back and chuckled loud enough that heads turned. Wait, he said, shaking his head. "You're telling me that this is how you solved it?" Javion blinked. "Yes, that's the correct solution." "Oh, I'm not saying the answer's wrong," Mr. Connor said, still grinning. "I'm saying your method is what's confusing. This isn't how I taught it. You skipped half the steps. This is not how math works." The class started murmuring. "I just simplified both sides at the same time," Javion explained. "It's a faster doesn't mean right, Javion. But I got the right answer." Mr. Connor crossed his arms. "What you got was lucky. We follow structure in this class. There's a reason the state mandates specific procedures. You're not here to reinvent math." The laughter returned. This time not from Connor, but from a few students in the back. One of them muttered, trying to act like Einstein. Javion stared at the board. His face felt hot. He wasn't trying to show off. He just thought math was supposed to be about answers. About logic. Not submission. Trevor chuckled. Bro wrote a whole paragraph up there. Elsie looked uncomfortable but didn't say anything. No one did. Javion turned toward Mr. Connor. His voice flat. Isn't the point to understand, not just repeat what's taught? Mr. Connor's face tightened. Get back to your seat. Javion walked back slowly, burning with a mix of embarrassment and something deeper, something heavier, like he'd stepped out of bounds in a game where the rules weren't written down, but everyone else somehow already knew them. As he sat, he noticed Rachel, one of the quiet girls in the back, slip her phone back into her hoodie. She'd recorded the entire moment. He didn't think much of it at first, but by the next morning, everything would change. The teacher calls him to the board, then publicly mocks his solution in front of the class, and someone captures the moment on video. The teacher humiliates him with a smug smirk, insisting he's wrong without checking the math. The next morning, Javion walked into class with his head down and earbuds tucked into his hoodie pocket. He wasn't playing music, just keeping them close, like armor. He could still hear the laughter from yesterday, echoing faintly in his head. It wasn't the kind of laugh that faded with time. It was sharp, lingering, like chalk scraping across a blackboard. Room 207 was already half full. Trevor and his friends were throwing paper balls into the wastebasket near the front. Mr. Connor stood at his desk, organizing stacks of worksheets with clinical precision. When he noticed Javion walk in, his smile faltered, then returned, practiced and tight. "Morning, Mr. Carter," he said, without warmth. "You ready to give it another honest try today?" Javion stopped halfway to his seat. "I was right yesterday," he said quietly. Mr. Connor looked up, feigning surprise. "Excuse me?" "The answer was right," Javion repeated. "You said it wasn't how you taught it, but the solution worked. I checked it again." The teacher's smile faded altogether. "You think you're smarter than me now?" "I didn't say that." Connor dropped the papers onto the desk. "You didn't have to." His voice was calm but cutting. "Sit down, Javion. Let's make sure we can all get through the lesson without interruptions this time." Javion exhaled slowly and took his seat. Elsie, sitting beside him, whispered, "You shouldn't have said that." "I just told the truth," he said. "Yeah," she murmured, "and that's what makes him mad." Mr. Connor turned to the board and wrote the day's lesson in his usual slow, deliberate way. Systems of linear equations. He spent the next 10 minutes lecturing, never glancing Javion's way. But when it came time to solve an example, his tone shifted. "Let's test our confidence today," he said, scanning the room. "Javion, why don't you come up again?" The room went still. A few students turned in their chairs. Trevor smirked, already sensing where this was going. Javion hesitated. His pulse quickened, but he nodded. "Okay." He rose, took the marker, and faced the board. The problem read, 3 backspace xy. He worked quickly, solving one equation for x and substituting it into the other. His hands moved naturally, the way a musician moves across keys. Within minutes he had the result, xc6y. He stepped back, quietly confident this time. "That's the answer," he said. Mr. Connor folded his arms. "Is it?" "Yes," Javion replied. The teacher walked to the board, marker in hand. He circled the solution with a flourish, then turned to the class. "See this right here," he said, tapping the board, "is why structure matters." Laughter rippled through the room. Javion frowned, unsure what was funny. Connor continued. He jumped steps, no demonstration of substitution, no graphing method shown, no alignment with the district's solution guide. "This might look right, but it's not how the process is evaluated." "But it's still correct," Javion said, trying to stay calm. Connor smirked. "Mathematically? Maybe. Educationally? No. You don't get points for skipping the process. So it's about following rules, not about understanding." "Exactly," Connor said, smiling tightly. "And maybe if you spent less time trying to show off, you'd understand that." The laughter grew louder this time, crueler. Javion's ears burned. His throat tightened, but he forced himself to breathe evenly. He wasn't angry, not yet. Just tired. Tired of being told to wait his turn to think. He looked around. Every pair of eyes was on him, some amused, others pitying. Rachel, the quiet girl from yesterday, had her phone angled low, half hidden behind her notebook. Connor leaned against his desk. Let's break down what he did wrong, shall we? Step 1. Javion interrupted softly. Can we just test it? Plug in the numbers? The teacher blinked. Excuse me? Plug it back into the equation, Javion said. If it balances, then it's correct. That's what math is. The class fell silent. Connor's smile thinned. We're not doing it your way, Javion. I'm teaching my lesson. But, sit down. Javion didn't move. For a moment it looked like he might defy him. But then he dropped the marker onto the ledge and walked slowly back to his desk. The sound of the marker hitting the board echoed in the still room like a gavel. See? Connor said, addressing the room. This is exactly why we follow structure. Otherwise we get chaos. Trevor chuckled again. Guess genius doesn't mean grades, huh? The room laughed. Elsie didn't. She watched Javion sit down, eyes dark with worry. He looked out the window, jaw set. Mr. Connor turned back to the board and started writing out the correct method in long, rigid steps. But as he explained each line, he made a crucial mistake. He misapplied the subtraction rule and ended with xe8. He didn't notice, but Javion did. And so did Rachel, who quietly zoomed in her camera to catch the error. When the bell rang, everyone filed out in clumps of laughter and chatter. Mr. Connor called after Javion. We'll talk after class tomorrow about your attitude. Javion didn't answer. He walked straight out, shoulders tight, face blank. That night his mother noticed his silence at dinner. You okay, baby? She asked, setting down her fork. Yeah, he said. Just school stuff. You know I don't like that just word, she said gently. What happened? He hesitated. He didn't want to tell her. Didn't want her to worry. She worked double shifts at the hospital. She didn't need more weight on her back. It's fine, Ma, he said. Just some teacher drama. I'll handle it. She gave him a long look, then nodded. All right. Just remember, don't ever let anyone make you feel small. You got something special. Don't you let them bury it. He nodded, but her words felt distant. At midnight, Javion was half asleep when his phone buzzed. It was a message from Elsie. Go check TikTok. Someone posted the video. He sat up. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked his phone. The post was titled, When the Smart Kid Gets Too Confident, Redwood High Math Fails. The clip showed him at the board, explaining his work. Then the camera panned to Connor, laughing, saying, This isn't how math works. The students' laughter echoed through the tinny phone speakers. The comments were worse. He really thought he was Einstein. Bro acting like he discovered algebra. Always gotta make it about being special. Javion scrolled, his stomach twisting. There were hundreds of comments already. Most mocking, some outright racist. Of course it's the black kid thinking he's smarter than the teacher. He stopped reading. His mother's door creaked open. You still up? She asked softly. He quickly shut off the screen. Just homework. Try to get some rest, she said. You've got a good mind. Don't waste it on worry. When she left, Javion turned the phone face down on his desk. But the sound of that laughter wouldn't leave him. By morning the post had over 20,000 views. Students in the hallway whispered as he passed. Some avoided eye contact. Others smirked. One voice in the crowd said, just loud enough for him to hear, That's the math prodigy right there. Mr. Connor looked smug as ever when he walked into class that day. All right, everyone, he said, tone dripping with cheer. Let's settle down. I hear we've gone viral. Laughter filled the room. Javion froze in his seat. The teacher smirked at him. Not directly naming him, but everyone knew. That's the power of social media, Connor said. One little mistake and the whole world's watching. A lesson for all of you. Javion clenched his fists under the desk. You mean your mistake, he said under his breath. Connor looked up. What was that? Nothing, Javion said. Rachel caught his eye from across the room and mouthed two words. I posted it. He frowned. She gave the smallest nod, and for the first time a flicker of hope sparked under all that humiliation. Something was about to shift. Another student recorded the whole scene and posts it online, but not to mock him, to expose the teacher's lie. The clip explodes across TikTok and YouTube. But the narrative flips. Unteachable black kid shows attitude. By the third morning, Redwood High wasn't the same. The hallways buzzed with a strange electricity, laughter, whispers, and stares that followed Javion like a shadow. Every locker slam felt louder, every passing comment sharper. Overnight, he'd gone from being the quiet, advanced student in the back row to the punchline of a national debate he never asked to start. The video that Rachel had quietly uploaded had been meant as proof, evidence that Mr. Connor had humiliated him unjustly. But once it escaped the walls of the school, it took on a life of its own. TikTok clipped it down to 30 seconds. The teacher's laugh, Javion's confused silence, and the phrase that echoed across millions of screens. This isn't how math works. On YouTube, reaction videos multiplied by the hour. Arrogant student challenges teacher. One title read, racking up hundreds of thousands of views. Another one, teacher destroys smart-mouthed teenager in class. None of them mentioned his name, but everyone in Redwood knew exactly who it was. In the comment sections, the tone wasn't curiosity. It was mockery. Kids these days have no respect.
Bet he's always got an excuse.
Public schools need to bring discipline back. Typical can't handle being corrected. By noon, the video had crossed 1 million views. Local radio stations picked it up, and news anchors debated it like it was a cultural event. A Fox affiliate ran the headline, Student Challenges Authority, Sparks Classroom Uproar. No mention of race, no mention of bias, just the familiar frame, the problem student. At lunch, Javion sat alone in the corner of the cafeteria. His tray was untouched, the food congealing under fluorescent light. Around him, fragments of conversations drifted from every direction.
Bro, he really thought he knew better than the teacher.
He looked mad disrespectful though. I heard he cussed him out after class. He wanted to stand up, shout the truth, that he never raised his voice, never insulted anyone. But what good would it do? In the age of viral videos, the truth didn't go viral. The spectacle did. Elsie approached quietly, setting her tray down across from him. You okay? He forced a faint nod. Yeah. She looked unconvinced. They're making it worse, Jay. The whole story's flipped. I know. They're calling you unteachable. Her voice broke on the word. Javion's throat tightened. They can call me whatever they want. Doesn't change the math. But deep down he knew it wasn't about math anymore. It never was. Across the cafeteria, Trevor and his friends huddled over their phones, laughing. One of them mimicked Javion's voice, stuttering fake equations. The laughter echoed, raw and cruel. Elsie started to stand up. I'm going to say something. Javion shook his head quickly. Don't. They'll just turn on you too. She sat back down reluctantly. You don't deserve this. He looked at her, eyes hollow. Deserving's got nothing to do with it. That evening, Javion's mother, Renee Carter, came home from a 12-hour hospital shift, with exhaustion painted across her face. She barely had time to change out of her scrubs when her phone started buzzing non-stop. Renee Carter? A voice said on the other end of one call. This is Channel 9 News. We'd love a statement regarding your son's classroom video. She froze. Excuse me? We understand he attends Redwood High. She hung up. Another call came through. Then another. Her work phone buzzed too. Her supervisor texting. We need to talk about some concerns raised online. Call me. When Javion walked into the kitchen, she was sitting at the table, phone in hand, eyes full of worry. What happened, baby? She asked softly. Why are people calling me about a video? He hesitated, standing in the doorway. It's nothing, Ma. Just a misunderstanding. She studied him carefully.
You tell me the truth. Did you disrespect that teacher?
He shook his head. No, ma'am. He laughed at me. I got the answer right. He just didn't like how I solved it. Her jaw clenched. And that's what this is about? He nodded slowly. She sighed, rubbing her temples. Lord, they'll twist anything, won't they? She stood and walked to him, placing a hand on his shoulder. You keep your head, you hear me? You did right. The truth'll come out. But truth had already been buried under noise. By the next morning, the school principal had called Javion into the office.
Principal Hayes was a man who spoke like every word needed approval from the school board before leaving his mouth.
Javion, he began, folding his hands on the desk. We've been getting quite a bit of attention over this incident. Javion sat stiffly. I didn't do anything wrong. I understand your perspective, Hayes said, tone flat, rehearsed. But perception matters. The video portrays a student challenging authority, and that authority can be wrong, Javion said quietly. Hayes blinked, then smiled like a man pacifying a child. You're a bright young man, but this kind of publicity puts us all in a difficult position. The district wants to avoid escalation. Escalation? He laughed at me in front of everyone. Be that as it may, Hayes continued. Mr. Connor has filed a report stating that your behavior disrupted the learning environment. Javian stared. He humiliated me. I'm sure he didn't intend harm, Hayes said quickly. Sometimes passion in teaching gets misinterpreted. Javian felt his stomach twist. Passion. That was what they called it when a white teacher mocked a black kid for being smart. Hayes leaned back. For now, I'm recommending a temporary suspension from advanced math until this settles. The words hit like a slap. Suspension? For doing math? Just a precaution. It's about maintaining harmony. Javion rose slowly, eyes burning. You mean keeping him comfortable? Hayes frowned. Watch your tone, son. Javion left without another word. Outside the office, Elsie waited anxiously. What did they say? He stared at the floor. They're suspending me from advanced math. Her eyes widened. What? You're the best student they have. Not anymore, he said, walking past her. That afternoon, the story made the local paper. Students' disrespect sparks classroom debate on discipline. Below it, a quote from the district superintendent. We value student voices, but classroom order must always be maintained. That evening, Renee sat at the kitchen table again. This time with her laptop open to an email from Javion's top choice university, Windermere Tech. Her hands trembled as she read it aloud. Dear Ms. Carter, we regret to inform you that Javion's early scholarship recommendation has been placed under review following recent concerns raised by the Redwood Unified School Board. Her voice cracked on the words. Under review. Javion. What does that mean? He felt the air leave his chest. They pulled it? I don't know, she said, scrolling down. They said they're reevaluating eligibility due to behavioral reports.
Javion's mind went blank. For years he'd worked for that scholarship. Every late-night study session, every weekend competition, every test he'd aced without credit. All of it, now reduced to a viral clip and a label, unteachable.
He sat back, numb. They think I'm some troublemaker now. Renee reached for him, her voice breaking. We'll fix this. I'll call them. I'll explain. They won't care, he said quietly. They already made up their mind. He stood and walked to his room, the weight of injustice pressing down like gravity. Behind him, his mother's quiet sobs filled the kitchen. In his room, the light from his phone screen flickered across his face. The video was still climbing, now at 2 million views. The comments were uglier than ever. Why is he even in honors math if he can't respect his teacher? Another example of bad parenting. Attitude problem disguised as talent. But one new comment stopped him cold. It was from a verified account. The name unfamiliar. The boy's equation is actually correct. Someone should check the teacher's math. Dr. Langston Maris. Javion stared at it, heart pounding. The name sounded familiar. He opened a new tab and searched. The first result. Dr. Langston Maris, theoretical physicist, MIT alum, NASA research consultant. His breath caught. The man was a legend. For the first time in days, something cut through the fog of humiliation. A spark of recognition, of validation. Someone saw the truth. Someone powerful. He refreshed the page again, eyes locked on the comment. But it was already gone. Deleted. The school board reviews the viral footage and pulls Javion's scholarship recommendation, just as a mysterious scientist briefly comments online, hinting that the boy's math might actually be right. The Monday after the board's decision, Redwood High's hallways felt colder, quieter in a way that wasn't peace but judgment. Javion's name traveled like static under breath, in whispers that stopped the moment he turned a corner. His mother had walked him to the door that morning, her jaw set, telling him not to lose focus, not to give them any more reason to twist his story. He wanted to believe her strength could protect him. But as he stepped into room 207, the silence told him otherwise. Mr. Connor didn't even look up from his desk. His voice, when it finally came, was calm, too calm. Everyone, take your seats. Before we begin today, I want to remind you about respect in the classroom. His eyes flicked toward Javion. When we undermine authority, we all lose. The message was obvious. The class laughed under their breath, feeding off the teacher's smirk. Javion sank lower in his chair, his chest tightening. He wanted to speak up, to remind everyone that he'd been right, that the numbers didn't lie. But something in him warned not to. They weren't listening for truth. They wanted entertainment. 2 hours later, his name echoed over the intercom. Javion Carter, report to the main office immediately. The walk there felt endless. Every step carried the weight of humiliation he hadn't earned. When he entered the principal's office, Mr. Hayes was sitting beside a woman he hadn't seen before. Sharp suit, clipboard, official expression. Javion, Hayes said softly. This is Ms. Dalton from the district's disciplinary committee. Javion nodded cautiously. Am I in trouble? Hayes sighed. We've been reviewing the ongoing situation involving you and Mr. Connor. The district has received numerous complaints from parents and community members, concerned about the classroom incident and its aftermath. Javion frowned. Complaints about what? I didn't do anything wrong. Miss Dalton adjusted her glasses. There's concern regarding your behavior, your tone toward faculty, and the disruption caused by your viral video. It has reflected poorly on the district. The video, he asked. The one where he laughed at me. The issue, she interrupted, is not the teacher's behavior, but the resulting distraction. You mean me, Javion said flatly. The distraction is me. Silence stretched. Hayes finally spoke. For the sake of restoring order, the board has decided to issue a temporary suspension, 3 days, effective immediately. The words hit him like a blow. Suspension, for what? Aggression, Dalton said. Verbal defiance. Refusal to follow classroom procedure. Javion blinked, stunned. I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. Intent matters, she said coldly. Sometimes it's not what's said, it's how it's said. His heart sank. He understood now. They didn't need proof. They needed peace. And peace, in their eyes, meant his silence. He stood, trying to steady his voice. You're suspending me because I embarrassed him. Hayes folded his hands. That's not accurate. It's exactly what's happening, Javion said, his voice trembled. He messed up, and you're protecting him. Javion, Hayes warned. This tone. No, Javion snapped, cutting him off. You said respect matters, but it's only respect when it's towards someone like him, right? Not me. Hayes looked down at his desk, avoiding his eye. You're dismissed, Mr. Carter. Your mother's been contacted. When Javion walked outside, the air felt heavy with the scent of rain. Students watched through windows as he crossed the parking lot toward his mother's car. Renee was already waiting, face unreadable. She didn't speak until they were halfway home. Suspension, she said softly, gripping the steering wheel. That's what they called it. He nodded. Aggression, she laughed bitterly. Aggression. You can't even raise your voice at me, let alone your teacher. They said I was a distraction. Her eyes flickered with pain. You being smart is a distraction now. He stared out the window, his reflection blurring in the glass. Ma, what if this ruins everything? It won't, she said firmly, though her voice cracked. You hear me? They can't destroy what's inside you. They can only scare you into hiding it. But he could hear the worry behind her strength. She was fighting the world for him, one shift at a time, and now his name was a headline that followed her to work. That night, the lights in their apartment stayed off longer than usual. Renee sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through her phone. Hospital coworkers had begun sharing the video in private chats. Some found it interesting, others embarrassing. By midnight she had stopped reading altogether. In her inbox, a new message arrived, from her supervisor. Please be aware that your son's recent viral activity has raised concerns about professionalism and public image. We'll discuss this in person tomorrow. She didn't tell JV. Instead, she closed the laptop and went to his room. He was lying awake, staring at the ceiling. You okay, baby? She whispered. He nodded, though his eyes said otherwise. You ever feel like the more right you are, the more wrong they make you seem? She sat beside him, brushing his hair back. Every day of my life, she said. But you still stand tall. You don't let them decide what your truth is. What if the truth doesn't matter? He asked. Then you make it matter, she said. That's what being us means. The next morning, she went to work early, shoulders heavy but determined. She wore her cleanest uniform, her ID badge clipped straight. The hospital had always been her sanctuary, a place where effort meant something, or so she thought. At noon, her supervisor, Lang, called her into the small HR office. The blinds were half drawn, the air thick with formality. Renee, thank you for coming, Lang began gently. We value your service here, but we've received some complaints. Complaints? Renee asked. About what? About a video circulating online, involving your son. Some patients have connected it to our hospital after noticing your uniform in comments on social media. Renee frowned. What does my job have to do with a school video? Unfortunately, public perception affects our image, Lang said, avoiding eye contact. We've been advised to review your employment status. You're firing me, Renee said flatly. Lang sighed. We're issuing a temporary termination pending further review. Temporary termination, Renee repeated, voice trembling. That doesn't even make sense. It's administrative language, Lang said softly. I'm sorry, Renee's chest tightened. She'd worked there for 7 years, through pandemics, staff shortages, and now because of a 30-second clip she was disposable. She stood slowly, her chair scraping the floor. "You're not sorry," she said quietly. "You're scared, just like the school board, just like everyone else." Lang didn't respond. As Renee walked out, her badge felt heavier around her neck, like a weight she hadn't earned. When she reached the parking lot, she sat in her car for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel. For a moment, she thought of crying, but the tears wouldn't come, only anger, only exhaustion. At home that evening, Javion was waiting at the kitchen table, books open but untouched. When she walked in, he looked up. "They called me," he said quietly. "The school board. Yeah, they said the suspension might be extended." He paused. "They're investigating if my behavior violated their code of conduct." Renee exhaled sharply, pulling out a folded envelope from her bag. She set it on the table in front of him. "You're not the only one they're punishing." He picked it up and read the header. "Notice of employment termination." His face went pale. "They fired you. Said it's about public misconduct involving my child." "What does that even mean?" he asked, voice break. "It means they think standing up for yourself makes me unfit to do my job." He stared at the letter, heart pounding. Everything he'd tried to control was slipping away. His name, his future, even his mother's stability. "Ma, I'm so sorry. Don't you dare," she said, her voice "This isn't your fault. This is what happens when they can't silence you. They go after everything around you. What are we gonna do?" "We fight," she said simply. "We fight smarter than them." Her eyes hardened. "They want us quiet, but we'll make noise the right way." She didn't know how yet, but something in her tone made Javion believe her. Then, just as he started to breathe again, her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her face going still. The message read, "Please be advised, your son's incident is now part of a public ethics review. Expect contact from the district's legal department." Renee looked up at her son, voice barely above a whisper. "They're not done with us yet." His single mother receives a job termination letter citing public misconduct involving her child. Javion sat on the edge of the couch, laptop glowing against his face in the dim light. It was late, but he couldn't sleep. Every news alert, every mention of his name online, had become a new bruise. He didn't need to search for his own humiliation anymore. Google served it to him without asking. Local news had picked up the story fully now, and none of it felt like the truth. Channel 3 had aired a segment titled, "Student Sparks Classroom Controversy. District Calls for Calm." The footage they showed was cropped, just enough to cut out the teacher's mocking laugh, but keep Javion's stiff silence. The anchor's voice was calm, clinical. A viral video has sparked outrage after a Redwood High School student allegedly disrespected a longtime educator during a math lesson. Some parents are calling the behavior concerning and say it reflects a larger problem with discipline in schools. There was no mention of what led up to the incident, no mention of the equations, no mention of the humiliation. Just that same phrase over and over: disruptive student, threat to learning environment, challenged authority. One headline even called him an example of growing entitlement among youth. Renee watched the news from the kitchen, her arms folded tight across her chest. "They're building a whole case off 30 seconds, she said bitterly. 30 seconds where you didn't even raise your voice." Javion closed the laptop. "Doesn't matter. They've already decided who I am." "No," she said. "They decided who they want you to be. That's different." He didn't respond. He just sat there staring at the blank screen, feeling his future bleed out one headline at a time. The next day, a new wave hit. A radio talk show out of Nashville ran a full segment on the Redwood math kid, framing it as part of a nationwide debate about student discipline and cultural erosion. The host, a white man with a gravelly voice and a smug laugh, said things like, "Back in my day, if you challenged a teacher, you got detention, not a TikTok account." His co-host chimed in, "I'm not saying the kid's a menace, but if he's got this much attitude now, imagine him in college." Callers flooded in with their own opinions, most of them parroting the same lines. "No respect anymore. These kids are out of control. He should be grateful to be in honors math. At all." One woman said, "I don't care how smart he is. If he's not teachable, he's not ready for the real world." Javion listened to that one on loop, the words carving themselves into his chest. Even at school, the narrative had shifted entirely. Students weren't asking him what happened anymore. They were avoiding him altogether. Teachers stopped calling on him in other classes. In the hallway, he caught fragments of a conversation between two administrators. Disrupted 3 days in a row. His mom's getting loud too. It's a PR problem now. Board wants this to die quietly. We just need to ride it out. Javion turned the corner before they saw him. It wasn't just a misunderstanding anymore. It was a machine, and he was the part it wanted to remove. Elsie met him at his locker, eyes wide with urgency. Jay, it's getting worse. I know, he said. They're saying I threatened the learning environment. She opened her phone. Did you see this one? It was a Facebook post by a local parent. My son goes to Redwood and says this student was always disruptive and confrontational. Kids like that ruin education for everyone. We support Mr. Connor. Javion's hands curled into fists. I don't even know who that is. Elsie's voice lowered. It's spreading. There's Facebook groups, Reddit threads. They're digging through your old posts, trying to paint you like you've always been trouble. They're building a character I don't even recognize, he whispered. She touched his arm gently. You have to fight back. With what? He asked. The truth? The truth doesn't trend. That night, he and Renee sat at the dinner table, with plates untouched between them. She looked more tired than usual, her apron still stained from the side job she'd picked up that week, cleaning offices on weekends. They didn't talk about the bills piling up. They didn't talk about the fridge making that wheezing sound again. But they both knew what was coming. Javion finally broke the silence. I don't think I'm going back. Renee looked up sharply. To school? They've already decided who I am. I'm just walking into a place where every teacher looks at me like I'm a problem they have to fix. You are not quitting, she said firmly. Not after everything. What am I even fighting for, he said. The scholarship's gone. The college dropped me. The whole city thinks I'm dangerous because I solved a math problem differently. She stood and walked over to him. You're not fighting for a scholarship. You're fighting for yourself. You think if you disappear, they'll stop. They won't. You being right was the threat. Not how you said it. Not what you did. You were never supposed to be that smart, that fast, that confident. That's what scared them. Javion looked up at her. His voice soft. What if I'm not enough to fix it? She knelt beside him. Then I'll stand behind you until you are. For a long time, neither of them said anything. Just sat in the quiet, hearts pounding. Later that night, Javion opened his email out of habit, expecting more junk, more forwarded articles slandering him. But one message stood out immediately. No name. Just a clean, sharp subject line. Your math was correct. He stared at it, unsure if it was real. His cursor hovered, heartbeat rising. He clicked it open. Inside was a short message. Javion.
I saw the video. Your approach to the equation was elegant, efficient, and mathematically sound. Not only was it correct, it was advanced for your age. Most wouldn't have caught that. I did.
If you're interested in talking, I'd like to hear more about your work. Dr. Langston Maris. Javion's breath caught. That name again. He clicked on it, uncertain. The signature was real. The email was from an official domain. Langston Maris, theoretical physicist, author of 3 textbooks on nonlinear systems, and former NASA research consultant. He'd read about him once, years ago, in a library book. He was a legend in the field, especially rare because he was black and had broken through walls most didn't even see coming. Javion reread the message twice, then 3 more times. Meh, he called out. She rushed in, expecting bad news. He turned the screen to her. Look. She leaned in, eyes narrowing. Whose? Her jaw slowly dropped. Langston Maris. Javion nodded slowly. She sat beside him, stunned. How did he find you? I don't know. But he wants to talk. For the first time in weeks, the air felt lighter. The story wasn't over. Not even close. But before they could process it, a new alert flashed on the screen. Another news article. Just posted. Redwood High to launch ethics investigation into viral student. Possible expulsion looming. Javion looked at his mother. The storm wasn't done yet. A mysterious email arrives. Subject line. Your math was correct. Just as Javion begins to hope, a new headline drops. Expulsion. Javion didn't sleep that night. He stayed at his desk, phone buzzing beside him. Headlines scrolling endlessly, but all he could focus on was the email. He read it again and again, dissecting every word like it was a formula he needed to solve. This wasn't a prank. The signature matched. The domain was real. It came from Langston Maris. The Langston Maris. A man whose name was spoken with reverence in scientific circles but rarely in public. The kind of black excellence that was both celebrated and hidden, like the world didn't quite know what to do with brilliance that looked like his. The books Javion remembered weren't even assigned in school. They were library finds. He remembered one cover clearly: Nonlinear Systems and Quantum Fractals. Maris had been quoted saying that math wasn't just numbers, it was philosophy wearing numbers as clothes. He once gave a lecture at Stanford where he said, "We keep telling kids to stay in line, but breakthroughs happen when you step out of it." Javion hadn't understood that line back then. Now he did. At breakfast, Renee poured coffee with one hand and scrolled with the other. "You're sure this isn't fake?" she asked, eyes flicking over the email. Javion nodded. His address traces back to Caltech's guest faculty server. He teaches there part-time. She let out a long breath. "Okay. So what does he want?" "He wants to talk about my math. About the equation." Renee sat slowly, the weight of everything pulling her shoulders down. "Why now? After everything?" I think he saw something in it. Something even Mr. Connor didn't understand." She studied her son carefully, pride flickering behind her worry. "What are you going to say?" Javion exhaled. "Yes. I want to talk." He replied with cautious gratitude, writing and rewriting his response before finally pressing send. Within minutes, Maris responded. No fluff, no pretense. "Javion, if you're serious about the math, I'd like to meet in person. I have a private lab in Mendocino County. Remote, but quiet. You'll learn more in a weekend here than in a semester under people who don't see you. Bring the exact equation you used in class. I need to see the work that started all this." LM. Javion reread the message with a trembling hand. The words weren't casual. They were surgical. He knew this was serious. Maris didn't seem like the type to waste time or to offer invitations lightly. He showed his mom the new message. She read it once and said, "Where is Mendocino?" 5 hours north. "You sure he's safe?" "He's not some stranger, Ma. He's been in Scientific American. He did work for NASA." She looked at him long and hard. "If you go, I go with you." Javion nodded. "That's fair." 2 days later, they packed a small bag, printed out Javion's handwritten work from class, every line he'd written, the day Connor mocked him, and boarded a bus that wound its way through Northern California. As the city melted into forest, Javion kept looking out the window, mind racing. There was a strange calm about the journey. Not peace, exactly, more like purpose. When they arrived, Maris was waiting at the edge of a gravel road in a gray overcoat, weathered face shaded by a brimmed hat. He was older than Javion expected, maybe late 60s, but his eyes were sharp, alert, like they were still solving problems nobody else could see. "You made it," Maris said simply. "Good." Renee stepped forward. "I'm his mother, Renee." Maris nodded respectfully. "Appreciate you bringing him. You're welcome to stay in the guest room. I'll keep him busy for a bit." Javion followed Maris down a narrow dirt path toward a cabin that looked more like a lab from a sci-fi movie. Solar panels lined the roof. Through the windows, walls were stacked with chalkboards, diagrams, and equations. It smelled of cedar, ink, and ozone, like the air had been rewired. Inside, Maris didn't waste a moment. He pointed to a table. "Show me what they laughed at." Javion carefully unfolded the paper. Maris took it with gloved hands, scanning it line by line. His face remained unreadable. "You did this during class?" "Yes." "No calculators?" "No." "And you didn't copy this?" "No, sir." Maris nodded slowly. "This reduction technique you used, it's not standard, but it's not wrong either. In fact," he paused, picking up a dry erase marker, "it's predictive." Javion frowned. "Predictive of what?" Maris turned to the board and began reworking the equation using Javion's shortcut, but expanded. Within minutes, the simple algebra turned into a visual pattern, one that looped into a linear transformation.
This method you used, Maris said, collapses redundancy in variable space. You're not just solving, you're compressing.
"I don't know what that means," Javion admitted. Maris turned. "It means you're seeing structure most kids don't even know exists. This isn't normal. It's advanced pattern recognition. It's the kind of thing we use in modeling chaos systems." Javion blinked. "Like weather? Or quantum stuff? Like how black holes bend time? Or how data clusters form artificial intelligence?" "Javion, you didn't just get a math problem right. You reinvented a path to it." For a moment Javion didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to being praised. Not like this. So why didn't the teacher see that? He asked. Because he was trained to teach, not to learn, Maris replied. And because you're not who he expects genius to look like. Javion's chest tightened. I've seen this before, Maris continued. Smart black boys who get penalized for thinking differently. They tell you to show your work, but when your work doesn't match their box, they call it wrong. He turned and looked Javion in the eye. Don't let them shrink you. For the next 5 hours, they worked side by side. Maris guided him through advanced functions, showed him how his equation mirrored matrix transformations. Javion kept up. More than that, he began to see it, feel it. The math wasn't just numbers anymore. It was movement, energy, truth. When they finally broke, Javion was exhausted, but alive in a way he hadn't felt in weeks. At dinner, Renee listened as the two of them talked over roasted vegetables and ginger tea. She watched her son's face light up. Watched the way Maris nodded with respect, not condescension. It made her want to cry, not out of sadness but relief. Someone finally saw her son for what he was. Before they left, Maris handed Javion a sealed envelope. This is a letter, he said, for any future academic you want to study under. It verifies that what you've done has legitimate scientific value. I rarely write these. Javion took it carefully. Thank you. One more thing, Maris added. This formula you created, it could be more than just a school scandal. I'd like to help you develop it, but only if you're willing to keep going. I am, Javion said, without hesitation. Good, Maris said, because the storm's not over, and next time, they'll come harder. As they boarded the bus back home, Renee sat beside her son in silence. But halfway through the ride, she leaned over and whispered, I think we just found your North Star. Javion nodded, eyes still on the envelope in his lap. Now I just have to survive the storm. When they got back, the first thing they saw was a notice taped to their door. Redwood Unified School District. Notice of disciplinary review hearing. Subject recommendation for expulsion. Javion froze. His hand trembled as he pulled it down. Dr. Maris invites the boy to a remote lab for a weekend, offering mentorship. But when they return, a letter is taped to the door. The school is now trying to expel him. Javion sat alone in his room, staring at the folded notice from the school board. Recommendation for expulsion. The words echoed in his mind like a bad loop. He just returned from the most validating experience of his life, only to be hit harder than before. It felt cruel, deliberate, like the system was gasping for one final chokehold before he could breathe again. But the paper wasn't the only thing on his desk. Beside it, lying open under a lamp, was the equation. His equation. The one they said didn't make sense. The one they mocked in front of his peers. The one Maris now believed could reshape the way vector calculus was approached at the undergraduate level. A formula that, by traditional logic, shouldn't work, but did. Over and over. Clean. Exact. Efficient. Maris had run it through simulations using his own datasets. Every time, the result aligned with his models faster and cleaner than standard methods. Javion had built it by instinct, without knowing the formal terminology. It started with frustration. That day in class, he'd looked at both sides of the equation and wondered why no one was collapsing the symmetry early. He applied an idea he'd read once about vector pairs, canceling each other across fields. That single thought had opened a new door. Maris had called it a conceptual mutation, a deviation so bold, it became evolution. Javion just called it survival. Later that night, he opened his inbox. Another message from Maris. Javion, attached is a rough draft of a paper I'm writing based on our weekend. I haven't included your name yet. That's your decision. But the work is yours. You have every right to lead this. LM? He clicked the attachment. 32 pages. Graphs. Notations. References to MIT publications. Maris had taken Javion's method and mapped it to real-world systems, machine learning algorithms, data compression, even biological modeling. His shortcut wasn't just clever. It had utility, real measurable power. Javion scrolled down to a section labeled Abstract Anomalies. There, Maris had written, this reduction mechanism appears to bypass traditional transitional limits in vector sequence alignments. Most striking is the speed at which the subject intuitively identified these collapses, without formal exposure to advanced field mapping techniques. The implication is clear. Mathematical genius can be emergent, not inherited through academia. Javion read that line 3 times. Emergent. That word felt like oxygen. He forwarded the document to himself with a simple subject, proof of who I am. The next morning, he printed 2 copies, one for himself, one for the disciplinary board. As he walked into the kitchen, Renee was at the table, staring blankly at a mug of coffee. She looked up when she saw the paper in his hand. "What's that?" "My defense," he said. She nodded slowly. "You sure you want to show them?" "I have to. Even if they don't understand it, they need to see that I'm not who they say I am." She reached out and touched his wrist. "They might not care. I know," he said. "But Maris does. And now I do too." Later that afternoon, he and Renee sat in front of a long wooden table, inside the district's administration building. 5 people faced them. 3 board members, 1 attorney, and Principal Hayes. Each had a copy of a thin folder. None had opened it yet. The chairwoman, Mrs. Allerton, was the first to speak. "Javian, thank you for coming. This review isn't a disciplinary hearing per se, but a formal inquiry into whether your continued presence poses disruption to the academic environment." Javian met her gaze. "My presence isn't the disruption. It's the assumptions made about me." There was a pause. Hayes cleared his throat. "We've received multiple reports citing inappropriate defiance, failure to follow instruction, and classroom disruption." Javian opened his folder and slid a printed copy of the paper toward them. "That's my work," he said. "The same work I was punished for doing." Ellerton glanced at the front page. "This is quite technical. It's the math I was doing in class." Dr. Langston Maris reviewed it. "He's vouching for it." One board member raised an eyebrow. "The scientist?" "Yes. He wrote the paper with me. Or more accurately, he built it around something I created. The equation that got me suspended." They all exchanged glances. Hayes looked skeptical. "This doesn't change the fact that you undermined a teacher's authority," he said. "I didn't undermine anyone. I solved a problem differently. Because I could. Because I saw a way they didn't teach." "Authority matters," Allerton said. "So does excellence," Javian shot back. "What exactly are we rewarding in these schools? Obedience or ability?" The room went quiet. Even Renee looked stunned. One of the board members slowly flipped through the document. "You're saying this work is original?" "It is. Maris can confirm it." The attorney leaned in. "Do you have written verification?" Javian nodded and pulled out the letter Maris had written. He passed it down the table. They read it in silence. One line stood out, bolded near the bottom. "To suppress this student's potential due to administrative discomfort would be a failure of educational ethics." Dr. Langston Maris. Hayes looked visibly uncomfortable now. "I understand this adds context," he said carefully. "But this doesn't negate the behavioral reports." Javian stood. "Behavioral reports built on discomfort with who I am, not what I did." Ellerton narrowed her eyes. "Javian, are you accusing the school of racial bias?" Javian held her gaze. "I'm saying if I looked different, we wouldn't be sitting here." No one spoke. The silence was thick, tense. Ellerton finally closed the folder. "We'll deliberate. You'll be notified of our decision by the end of the week." Javian nodded, then turned to leave. But as he reached the door, the attorney called out, "One question before you go. What exactly is the name of this equation?" Javian looked at him, then back at the panel. He said quietly, "I haven't named it yet." When they walked outside, the sun was warm, but his skin still felt cold. Renee turned to him.
"You okay?"
He nodded slowly. "I think so." That night, another email came from Maris. "I just read your defense transcript. You spoke truth. You held the line. That's what matters most. But listen closely, Javian. What you've created has value. And value makes people nervous. They'll try to take this from you. Or worse, discredit you. Be ready." Javian stared at the message. He believed every word, because deep down he already knew it. The doctor warns him, they'll try to take this from you or discredit you. Just 2 nights later, the tranquility of the narrow Mendocino road was broken by the glare of cell phone flashes. A social media post had surfaced. Photographs of Javian and Dr. Maris standing together outside the lab's glass facade. Maris's arm lightly resting on Javian's shoulder, both smiling at the camera. The caption read, "Junior genius makes history with top physicists. What's the school gonna do now?" Within hours, the post had exploded. But this picture wasn't meant for public consumption. It was taken by a visiting researcher who thought it was harmless news. That researcher's phone had been swiped and shared before the night was over. When Javion's mother, Renee, received the notification at 4 a.m., she sat upright in bed, heart skipping. The name Marison Carter scrolled on the screen. She dared open it. The comments were a mix of awe and suspicion. Whoa, how did a high school student get into a physics lab with an MIT legend? Must be a publicity stunt. Looks like pseudoscience to me. The next morning at school, the halls felt colder still. Javion walked past lockers and heard murmurings he couldn't quite catch, but their tone hit like punches. In class, his advanced math teacher looked away. The teacher he had already clashed with walked past him and muttered something low enough only Javion heard. Now he's getting celebrity treatment. He didn't stop. Javion kept his head down, shoulders tight. The backlash moved fast. Within 24 hours, forums for college admissions reported a trending topic: high school student claims physics breakthrough, valid or vanity. Universities reposted caution-promoting statements. While we celebrate innovation, we must verify academic integrity before endorsing youth claims. Many lab institutions quietly changed their mentorship language to exclude high schoolers from advanced modeling work. The tone was not encouragement, it was containment. That afternoon, Dr. Maris emailed Javion. Ignore the noise. They'll try to drown you out. But the email also had an attachment: a screenshot of an article by a prestigious university's newsletter. Under a headline, Amateur Mathematics and the Risk of Reputational Damage, the article warned of granting legitimacy without peer-reviewed publication. Javion read it with growing dread. Back at school, the teacher, Mr. Connor, saw the post. He didn't laugh this time. He frowned. Later, Connor's wife, a librarian at the school, alerted a parent group chat with a forwarded image of the lab outing. The message read, "He's not just challenging the teacher anymore, he's playing scientist. Where does that leave the rest of us?" The tone implied a black kid stepping out of line again, now elevated to celebrity, must be cut down. Javion's phone buzzed again during study hall. This time a text from an unknown number. "You're out of your depth. Stop this." He ignored it, but it ate at him. As the day ended, he found Renee waiting at his locker. Her face was pale, but her voice steady. "We might need to talk to someone. An attorney, maybe. This is bigger than school." He nodded. "I know." They stood together in the hallway, the noise around them muted, as if the world were reshaping itself into lines and chalk dust. That evening, Javion sat at his desk, staring at his printed paper on the equation. He thought of Maris's earlier words: "What you've created has value, and value makes people nervous." Now he understood. People were nervous because that value threatened their definitions of what a black kid was allowed to do, and they were trying to rewrite the story. The next morning, the local television station aired a new segment, footage of the lab accompanied by voiceover. Exclusive: Redwood High's math prodigy visits elite physics lab. Experts say this may be beyond high school scope. The anchor's tone was cautionary. A Harvard professor and a former NASA engineer were shown warning that without rigorous peer review, such work could mislead students about science standards. Javion watched it from the living room. Renee put a hand on his shoulder. "They're setting you up." He nodded. "Yeah." A week later, the unexpected twist. One of Mr. Connor's graduate school friends, teaching at a nearby university, posted on a faculty listserv, "I am concerned about the validity of the math being used in this case study. I'd like to see raw data." Within hours, the post circulated. Javion's mentorship with Maris now triggered scrutiny, not curiosity, but suspicion. That night, Maris called him. The phone had a low connection, but the urgency was clear. "Javion, they've already started the narrative. They'll either claim your work is pseudoscience, or claim you cheated somehow, and take it away from you. We must move quickly." He paused. "There's a conference soon. I'll present your idea under a pseudonym. If it passes peer review, your name goes on the paper. If it fails, we regroup." Javion's heart pounded. "Why pseudonym?" "Because you're seen as a risk, not a researcher." The words hit like a... The next morning at Redwood High, the PA system crackled. "Attention students, there will be a media briefing Thursday in the library regarding the recent student lab visit and its implications for the district." The student body buzzed with rumor and fear. Javion's locker was plastered with generic posters, now reading "Stay focused on school, not fame." Activists in the lunchroom shouted, "They're trying to cancel us," but most students just turned away. Then came the apex. Mr. Connor scheduled a television interview for the evening. On live broadcast, he claimed, "I helped the student refine the idea. That equation? It started in my class. With my guide." The teacher's face was composed, his voice measured, but the message was clear. The brilliant kid didn't do it alone. He needed the teacher. At home, Javion watched, chest burning, his hands tangled in his fingers. The narrative was shifting again, this time putting someone else on the pedestal and him beneath. Renee sat beside him, quiet. They're rewriting history now. Javion swallowed hard. They're trying to own it. The next morning, the disciplinary board called a special session. The notice returned. Javion's heart pounded as he prepared. He looked at Renee, asked softly, "What if they take it?" She squeezed his hand. "Then we'll fight." But even she didn't sound certain. The teacher goes on TV claiming he helped the student develop the formula, and Javion wonders if his idea will be reclaimed, silenced, or erased altogether. The letter arrived on a Wednesday, folded sharply inside a plain manila envelope with the school district's emblem printed coldly at the top. Renee held it in her hands like it might detonate. The wording was precise, legal, and piercing. Notice of intent to pursue civil action, defamation, misappropriation of educational materials, and disruption of district integrity. Javion read the lines once, then again, and still couldn't believe what he was seeing. The district, the same one that suspended him, smeared him, and tried to expel him, was now suing him. And not just him. The letter named Dr. Langston Maris as a co-defendant. He stood up from the table, his body trembling. "They're really trying to break us." Renee remained seated, eyes locked on the page. "They're saying you and Dr. Maris misrepresented the origin of the equation, that you falsely attributed the academic concept to yourself when it originated in a classroom under the instruction of an RUSD faculty member. They're saying I stole my own work." Javion's voice cracked. It wasn't disbelief anymore. It was something worse. The sense that no matter how right he was, no matter how strong the math, the system would twist the story until he didn't recognize himself in it. "What do they want?" he asked, though the answer was already there in black ink. A public retraction of the work, an apology for misrepresenting the academic process, and a cease and desist on any publications or presentations involving the formula. "They want silence," Renee said. "They want to bury what you did, and they're using the courts to do it." Javion sat down slowly, the weight too heavy for his legs. "They're scared, not of me, of what I proved." Renee's phone rang. She didn't recognize the number. It was Maris. "I just got served," he said flatly. "The district's playing every card they've got. They're accusing Javion of stealing his own math," she said. "Can they even do that?" "They can try," Maris replied. "And that's the point. It doesn't have to be legal, just loud. They want the world to believe it might be true. That's how they erase us." There was a long pause. "Langston," she said quietly. "What do we do?" "We fight back," he answered. "On paper, in court, and everywhere else they think we're not supposed to be." Within 48 hours, Maris filed a counterclaim, alleging racial bias, educational sabotage, and targeted institutional retaliation against Javion Carter. The document was sharper, less bureaucratic, and impossible to ignore. It cited not just Javion's treatment, but the school's history of disproportionately disciplining black students, its lack of representation in honors programs, and its silencing of students who challenged authority. The media caught wind immediately. The New York Chronicle ran the headline, "District sues teen over math discovery. Scientist counters with racism allegations." Javion's name was back in the news. But this time, not as a joke, as a battleground. The press flooded both sides. TV crews appeared at Redwood High, asking students if they believed the formula was original or coached. Parents were quoted saying things like, "He's being used. I don't trust that scientist. If this kid's so smart, why hasn't he published anything?" Others defended him. "He's a genius, and they're mad it didn't come from them. If he was white, they'd be building a statue. They'd never sue a student over being too smart unless he scared them." Javion stayed quiet during the chaos. His mother, on the other hand, became a force. She appeared on a local panel discussion, calmly explaining what had happened and challenging the board's version of events. The moderator asked, "Do you think race played a role here?" And she didn't hesitate. "Not just a role, the lead role. My son walked into a room with a gift they didn't expect from someone who looked like him, and they punished him for it." That clip alone reached 2 million views in under 24. But the tension wasn't just on TV. It was inside their home. Javion was exhausted. Not physically, but spiritually. Every interview, every news segment, Every tweet felt like another page written about him, without his permission. He sat with Maris over Zoom late one night. "What if this doesn't end?" he asked. "It won't," Maris said. "Not in the way you want. You're trying to return to a version of the world that didn't protect you to begin with. That world is gone." Javion was quiet for a long time. "So what now?" "You stop trying to belong to their system," Maris replied, "and you build your own." The next morning, a major twist dropped. Leaked emails from within the district surfaced online, courtesy of an anonymous whistleblower. One message, from a senior board member, read, "This equation is going viral, and none of us can explain it. We can't have a student's name attached to something we don't understand, especially with the scientist backing him. It's becoming a liability." Another said, "Connor's going public was a mistake. Now we look divided. Find a way to slow this momentum down." The leak was damning. It painted the school district not as truth seekers, but damage controllers. The court of public opinion began to turn. News anchors now shifted tone. Was this really about academic integrity, or a cover-up? Javion saw the shift but didn't celebrate. He knew it wasn't vindication. It was just another battlefront. Maris called again that evening. "We're winning public support, but don't get comfortable. These systems protect themselves," Javion asked. "Do you think they'll drop the suit?" Maris paused. "No. They'll try to settle, but only if we stay loud." Renee walked into Javion's room, holding another letter. Her hands were trembling slightly. "This one's different," she said. Javion opened it. It was from a private academic journal. They wanted to publish Maris's paper, but with one condition. The first author had to be Maris, not Javion. "They want to erase your name from your own discovery," she said, voice tight. Javion folded the letter carefully and looked at her. "No," he said. "We publish it our way, or we don't publish at all." She smiled, tired, proud. "You're more your father than you think," she whispered. Javion looked confused. "He never gave in either. He never got the chance to," she said. "But you're making him proud." Just as the world began to shift in his favor, Javion received an unexpected message on his school's portal. The principal wanted to meet privately. No press, no legal reps, just him. Maris counters with his own motion, alleging racial bias and educational sabotage. But before the lawsuit can move forward, the principal requests a secret one-on-one meeting with JV. The morning of the hearing, the courthouse lawn felt different, electric and heavy all at once. Media vans lined the plaza like taxicabs at a concert, microphones aimed like antennas, live banners scrolling names, math prodigy versus the district. Javion stood beside his mother outside the grand steps of the courthouse, his suit jacket a size too big, his tie chosen the night before with trembling hands. Renee clutched his elbow as they entered the building. She whispered, "You're ready," and though her voice wavered, her eyes were steady. Inside courtroom 4B, the air tasted like anticipation and stale coffee. The wood-paneled walls echoed solemn, hushed voices. A jury, lined up in front, watched as the judge took his seat. The district's legal team sat on one side, stern suits, paper stacks, faces unreadable. On the other, Langston Maris and Javion's attorney, burdened with binders and confidence. The gallery behind them filled with students, reporters and parents wearing expressions of expectation and conflict. Javion scanned the faces, some sympathetic, many curious, a few disdainful. The district opened. The lead attorney rose, cleared his throat. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here because a high school student, with alleged guidance from a scientist, has not only challenged academic norms, he has monopolized intellectual property that belongs to the school district and undermined the educational process. We intend to show that the student's actions disrupted the learning environment, and the formula he claims as original was derived under the supervision and resources of Redwood Unified School District." The words landed on Javion's chest like stones. He looked at his mother. She squeezed his hand. When the defense rose, the courtroom shifted. Javion's attorney spoke calmly. "Your Honor and members of the jury, what we see here is not a disruption. It is a breakthrough. My client, Javion Carter, solved a math problem differently. In doing so, he revealed a shortcut that has measurable academic value. His treatment has been discriminatory, and the district's attempt to reclaim his work is not about education. It's about control." A murmur ran through the gallery. Then came the unexpected twist. The defense called a witness who carried the weight of a lifetime of achievement. Dr. Langston Maris had already been publicly referenced, but here he sat in the box. He cleared his throat. "I've reviewed the equation," he said, voice calm, resonant. "In my 40-year career, I have never encountered such an intuitive reduction of variables. In my opinion, this child's solution is not only valid, it's revolutionary." The room gasped. Journalists scribbled. The district's legal faces flickered. Javion's chest expanded with hope. Maris laid out his testimony with precision. He explained how Javion's method collapsed redundancy in vector sequences, a concept at the graduate level. He referenced peer-reviewed papers, showed diagrams projected onto screens, walked the jury through the implications for data compression and modeling. When the court technician clicked through slide after slide, Javion felt like he was watching his mind unfold in public. At one point, Maris looked directly at him and said, "You did this. Don't ever doubt it." Javion's throat tightened. He swallowed hard and nodded. Then the district attorney stood. "Dr. Maris's credentials are impressive," she said. "But we must ask, was this student's work entirely independent? Or did he rely on Mr. Connor's instructions? And if so, does that constitute district-owned intellectual property?" The question hung, toxic and accusatory. Javion remembered the classroom. The smirk. The "this isn't how math works" comment. The laughter. It all rushed back. Suddenly the case pivoted. The district introduced video footage of the class, audio of teacher comments, eventually calling on Mr. Connor himself to testify. The teacher's face on the stand was carefully composed. He looked at Javion when asked whether he helped develop the equation. "I guided him on problem solving," he said slowly. "The student applied techniques we practice in class. I can't claim he came up with the entire method alone." Javion clenched his fist under the desk. This was the claim he feared most, that the teacher would take part of his story. The tension ratcheted when one of the teacher's graduate school friends took the stand as an expert witness. He testified that the method resembled modifications of standard curriculum approaches. That testimony framed Javion's work as a derivative of classroom instruction, rather than original. The gallery shifted. Gasps, murmurs, glance. Maris rose again. "No," he said quietly, but firmly. "What Mr. Connor describes is standard algebra instruction. What Javion achieved diverges entirely. He collapsed a dimension that isn't taught until graduate school. The fact that he did this in a high school environment is what's at stake." The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Carter," he addressed Javion directly. The room went still. "You have stated your equation is original work. You have Dr. Maris's testimony supporting it. However, given the complexity involved, and the accusations of misattribution, this court must ask you to validate your work under oath. Are you prepared to demonstrate the theorem live, here and now?" Javion's heart thudded. His mouth felt dry. His mind spun through the weekend with Maris. The numbers, the board meeting, the lawsuit. But this was something else. A live demonstration meant exposure, risk victory, and possibly collapse. He glanced at his mother. She nodded, her face steadied with pride and terror. The crowd leaned in. Cameras clicked. Reporters' faces reflected the moment back at him. His future hung in the balance. The judge drummed his fingers softly. "Will you demonstrate your work, Mr. Carter?" Javion inhaled deeply and stood. He walked to the exhibit board, positioned at the courtroom front. The jurors watched. The gallery stared. The cameras whirred. He unfurled his marker, a whiteboard waiting like a stage. As he wrote the first line of his equation, he felt all the pressure, the history, the racism, the disbelief pushing down, but also the truth in his fingertips. And when he reached the core reduction, the shortcut no one believed, his voice faltered for only a second, and then grew clear. Because he was not just defending himself, he was unveiling himself. The judge makes an unusual request, for the student to prove the theorem live, under oath, and the courtroom presses forward, as Javion begins his demonstration. Javion stood in the front of the courtroom, facing the large whiteboard that had been set up like a stage prop. Above him the judge's bench loomed, cameras perched like vultures, jurors watching, family and press in crowded rows. This was the same vulnerability he had felt in that classroom at Redwood High School, when he stood at the board and was laughed at. But now it was magnified. His chest felt heavy, the weight of his name, his mother's job, the formula, the lawsuit, all pressing down. And yet beneath the pressure, a tight coil of resolve rose. He would not be defined by that laughter again. The teacher, Mr. Connor, sat in the gallery, arms crossed, expression guarded. He had testified, claimed some involvement. But this moment, this board, this chalkboard-like surface, belonged to Javion. The marker was given to him. He pulled it out slowly, the click echoing in the hush of the courtroom. His mother, Renee Carter, sat a few rows behind him, silent but present, her eyes vigilant, proud and worried all at once. Dr. Langston Maris leaned forward in his seat, nodding ever so slightly, as if passing a torch. When the judge signaled, Javion cleared his throat. His voice trembled at first. "Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, I'll begin." He wrote the first line of the equation they mocked in class. 4-2 base 1. 3x2. It was familiar now, but it no longer felt like a trap. It felt like claim settling. He underlined it, paused, glanced at the jurors. This was the problem. But the process we used? That's what matters. He started walking through his steps, writing each reduction on the board. 8 dice 4 3x 2x watts 5 by 4 yo. He then wrote 5 dice 3x e7 2x e11. He boxed the final answer. A murmur rippled through the gallery. The press scribbled. The jurors leaned in. He drew a vertical divider and asked, "Now observe my shortcut." With quick, confident strokes he illustrated how the parentheses collapse, how redundant terms vanish, how he reached the answer more directly than standard method. The formula transformed before their eyes. Less chalk dust, more insight. The equation simplified, the reduction clear. Something elegant and efficient, not rushed or showy, but precise. He didn't smile. He rarely did. Instead, he held the room with his gaze, letting the math speak louder than the noise. Then he stepped back. The teacher's eyes flicked toward him. Something crossed Connor's face. Surprise. A teacher unused to being outpaced. A teacher unused to witnessing brilliance in this kind of light. The jurors watched the teacher watch him. Javion felt a wave of quiet triumph and fear, because brilliance, he'd learned, rarely enters a room unchallenged. The district's attorney stood. "Mr. Carter, your board claims you undermined classroom authority by using unapproved methods. Are you telling this court that you invented an alternative method to reach the same answer faster?" Javion nodded. "Yes, because I saw the structure differently, because math is about discovering truth, not replicating steps." The jurors exchanged glances. The gallery held its breath. Then came the twist. Javion brought up the printed page of the draft paper co-written with Dr. Maris. He slid it across to the clerk. "This shows that this isn't just a class trick. It maps to real vector transformations, plane collapses in higher dimension, not taught in high school." The district attorney made a face. "That's advanced." The tone implied a trap, but for Javion it was liberation. He had stepped from being ridiculed to being validated in full public view. As the questioning moved on, Mr. Connor was put to the test. The teacher was asked, "Did you cover collapsing redundancy in variable space with your students?" Connor's voice was firm. "No, we cover standard procedures. I did not teach or introduce this method." The moment hung heavy. Parents in the audience shifted uneasily. Camera lights glowed like stars locked on the board. After a break, the judge returned. "Mr. Carter, you're under oath now. If you continue, are all these steps your original idea?" Javion straightened. "Yes." The judge's voice was soft but firm. "Then we'll proceed. Show the jury the last part." Javion erased the board. Except for the last line, 2 by Z11. Exia time 5. He looked up at the jury. "Here's the outcome. But here's the real point." He wrote beneath, "Minimized redundancy. Accelerated solution." He then stepped aside and let the board reflect quietly. The stillness felt like power. At that moment, the classroom scene years ago flashed in his mind. The teacher's smirk, the laughter, the phone recording. Now here, in this controlled, magnified setting, he had redrawn the narrative. No longer disruptive kid, a student defining his space, a mathematician claiming respect. The gallery held its breath. The press leaned forward. Then the judge cleared his throat. "Before we adjourn for the day, Mr. Connor, would you like to respond to this?" The teacher stood slowly. He looked at the board, then at Javion, then at the jurors. His voice was measured. "Yes, I did witness this student's work, and if I may be honest, I was surprised, and yes, I felt uneasy, because this isn't how we taught it. But I cannot claim responsibility for it. Mr. Carter's method is beyond standard curriculum. There was a murmur across the courtroom. Javion's mother touched his shoulder. He felt tears welling. For validation. For relief. For her. The judge nodded. Thank you. We will reconvene tomorrow to hear closing arguments. He tapped the gavel. But as he did, the most dramatic moment arrived. Mr. Connor rose again, walked rapidly toward the exit, and stormed out without looking back. His departure echoed. The courtroom felt suspended. Conversations halted. The press lights flickered in confusion. Javion and his mother watched him leave. Renee asked quietly, "Who's running now?" Javion shook his head. "We don't know yet." He turned back toward the board. The testimony. The future he was writing. They filed out. Jurors still whispering. Press sprinting for statements. Outside the building, the cameras hovered. Javion and his mother stepped into the sunlight, shields collapsing. But his eyes were fixed ahead. One chalkboard moment behind him. One future ahead. As the final line appears on the board and jurors lean in, the teacher storms out of the courtroom, leaving Javion and the board to face what comes next without him. The morning after the courtroom session, when Javion and his mother stepped into the crisp air outside the courthouse, it seemed like the world had shifted on its axis. Social media feeds exploded. In black neighborhoods and online communities alike, people were cheering his name. Finally, wrote one pediatrician on Twitter, a young black genius refusing to be hidden. Church groups posted Sunday service clips tied to his story. A pastor in Georgia declared him a living rebuke to the system that says boys like him must stay quiet. Headlines in black-owned newspapers praised him as proof that brilliance doesn't wait for approval. Simultaneously, conservative media outlets fired up. A prominent talk radio host, his voice radio booming across the South, declared that what was happening at Redwood High in the court was a dangerous rewriting of math standards. He questioned whether the district should tolerate what he called self-styled prodigies, bypassing curriculum, bypassing structure, bypassing authority. On television, an education commentator asked, "If we let students redefine math at will, where does that leave teachers? Where does that leave institutions built on shared foundational steps?" The language was sharp. The tone was alarmed. The subtext was clear. A black student stepping outside traditional boundaries threatened more than just disciplinary norms. In the middle of this cultural storm, Javion felt caught between euphoria and exhaustion. At school, the student body was divided. At lunch, a new sign was posted near the cafeteria entrance. Honor the teacher. Respect the process. Some students whispered in the corners, "He's brave. He's brilliant. Maybe he's right." Others muttered, "He's trying to show off. What if this is too much for us?" In the hallway, a white teacher stopped Javion and said quietly, "Kid, your courage is visible. Don't let them drown it out." Javion nodded, thankful but wary. He already felt the weight of expectation, his community's pride, his mother's hopes, the lawsuit, the entire nation's gaze. At home that evening, Renee sat across from her son at the kitchen table, surrounded by letter openers and envelopes. He had logged into his college application portal. There were 10 universities listed. 2 had already sent rejections. "Not a big deal yet," she said lightly, trying to keep her tone calm. But when the 3rd and 4th arrived, quietly, the tone shifted. "What's going on?" Javion asked. Renee frowned. "I don't know yet, but something's off." They stayed up until midnight, refreshing portals, checking inboxes. The next morning, 5 more universities responded, all with variant forms of the same message. "We regret to inform you, no explanation, no scholarship offer." Then came the twist. One university accepted him. It was unexpected. Not a major brand name. Small, private, lesser known, but a significant opportunity: full merit scholarship, research partnership. The acceptance letter arrived in an elegant envelope. "We've reviewed your exceptional analytical work. We believe you represent the future of mathematics and innovation." Javion stared at it, disbelief mingling with relief. Renee exhaled long. "We got one." But the relief turned to suspicion. Why only one? Why now? Why this one? The contrast: 9 rejections, 1 acceptance, felt too stark. Meanwhile, conservative commentators seized on the college situation. "See?" said one anchor. "If he was truly a prodigy, dozens of elite schools would be lining up. Not just one minor institution." Another piece ran, "Elite institutions are rejecting this because they know it's not mainstream math. Watch how the industry penalizes deviance." The implication spread. The rejection wave wasn't about his race or his math. It was about disrupting comfort, and that message resonated across blogs and opinion columns on both sides of the divide. Black social media influencers uploaded vlogs. Don't let rejection define you. He's got offers for research. He's rewriting the system. One influencer highlighted Javion's upcoming scholarship as a beacon for Black youth. Comments poured in. Finally, someone who looks like me doing this. They tried to stop him. Now we're spotlighting him. Across TikTok and Instagram, clips of his courtroom demonstration were overlaid with gospel music, memes about breakthrough, photos of homeless students studying under streetlights. The text, "If he can shine, so can I." But the undercurrent was tension. At the school's board meeting, parents packed the gallery. Some wore "support the teachers" buttons. Others held homemade signs, "Stop rewarding attitude over process." One white parent spoke into the mic. "My daughter sits in the same class as him, and now the respect for the teacher is gone." A Black parent countered. "My son watched the video, heard the laughter, and asked why nobody defended him." The board chair cleared his throat. "We acknowledge the community is divided. We will reconvene committees to address equity and curriculum." But the words rang hollow to those watching. Inside Redwood High, students started forming groups. Team Carter and Team Tradition became informal club names. Javion avoided both. He studied in the library, kept his head down, but the eyes followed him, some with admiration, others with hostility. One afternoon, a senior tapped his shoulder. "Hey man, if you ever need backup with those scholars' letters, holler." The senior's tone was genuine. Javion nodded, surprised. He realized he had allies, but also realized that popularity felt like pressure. The division wasn't just around him, it was inside him. He felt the need to stand for something, but now the platform felt wider than any classroom he'd faced. That night, the local newspaper ran a feature titled, "1 Acceptance, 9 Rejections. What's Going On?" The article interviewed admission officers, anonymously, quoted one as saying, "We look for fit, adherence, readiness. This kid's math is over our heads, and we don't have criteria for it." Another said, "We would hesitate to give full scholarship to someone whose discipline history is under review." Javion's heart sank. They weren't talking about his math. They were talking about his record. Not the paper, but the record. When he got to his room, he found Maris waiting online. "I heard about your acceptances," Maris said slowly. "Good. But also, expected. This is part of the game." Javion asked bluntly. "Why only one school? Why rejections across so many?" Maris sighed. "Because when you play outside the lanes they've built, you scare them. They protect the lanes. You're being forced to choose between being in the game or changing the game." Javion looked at the acceptance letter again. For a moment it felt both win and exile. Renee came in with tea. "You okay?" she asked softly. "I'm tired," he admitted. "Tired of being the test subject. Tired of being divided." She nodded. "You don't have to carry the whole movement yet." His voice broke. "But I'm already carrying something." The room turned quiet, filled with the weight of expectation and the ache of isolation. Outside, opinion pieces continued. One headline read, "Prodigy or Problem Child. Math Miracle or Media Stunt." Another from a conservative think tank, "When schools let students skip steps, we all lose." The polarization spread like wildfire. For every tweet of support, there were several that questioned, demeaned, dismissed. For every Black encouragement, there was a white condemnation framed in concern for stand. Then came the final blow of the day. An email to Javion's mother from Windermere Tech, his top choice institution, due to recent reviews. "We regret we cannot pursue your son's application at this time. No reason provided." The acceptance letter from the smaller college felt bittersweet. Renee's eyes filled. "I'm sorry, baby. Don't," he said, voice firm. "We knew this would cost more than just letters." She touched his hand. "I know." In that moment, Javion realized the fight wasn't just about math anymore. It was about identity, about who got to be brilliant, about whether a Black teenage student could disrupt the system and still be welcomed into it. The country had witnessed his breakthrough. Now they were witnessing their reaction, and the reaction exposed as much as the achievement. He turned to his mother. "What do we do now?" She took a deep breath. "We lean into the one yes. We build from there." Javion nodded. But inside, he felt both step forward and step back. The platforms were ready. The stakes were higher. They weren't just offering him a future. They were demanding a future. His college applications are all mysteriously rejected. Except one. But when the acceptance comes, the question remains. What does it mean to win when the system still wants you confined? The week following the college application shock felt like a pressure chamber. Javion's room, usually quiet except for the hum of his desk lamp, now echoed with unanswered emails, pending letters, and the constant buzz of his phone. His mother, Renee, sat beside the window at dusk, watching traffic blur past, the weight of uncertainty heavy in the air. Then, one evening, his phone dinged with an unexpected message. "We'd like to meet you in person, privately." It simply read, "Global Technologies Inc., CEO Office." Javion blinked at the screen. A tech CEO, research position, scholarship. His mind whirled. The next morning, a black SUV pulled up in front of their modest townhouse. The tinted windows hid the driver. Renee stepped out first, supporting her son's elbow. Javion's tie was straight, and his jacket heavier than his frame seemed to bear. But his eyes held a new fire. The driver opened the door silently and ushered them in. A quiet flight, private terminal, then a sleek private jet. A hush of luxury that Javion had never experienced, one that contrasted shockingly with the classroom at Redwood High where he'd been humiliated weeks before. When they landed at the Silicon Valley estate, the CEO greeted them in a minimalist lounge. High ceilings, wide windows, a view of palm trees and glass towers. He smiled, extended his hand. "Javion Carter, I've followed your work." The CEO's voice was warm, precise, no pretense. "What you did with that equation, it has implications far beyond high school math. I'm offering you a full scholarship at Technova University, plus a year-long research position at our labs. We'll fund your publication. We'll support your invention." Javion's mouth went dry. Renee gripped his hand. He could feel the tremor in her fingers. This wasn't just an offer. It was a life wrap. The CEO leaned forward. "I know you faced setbacks. I know the board at Redwood tried to silence you. But we believe in your vision. We believe in you." Javion cleared his throat. "Thank you, sir." He paused, searching for the right words. The CEO's eyes locked on him. "I'd like you to start next semester. All expenses covered. Research funding included. First author on the paper. But there is one condition." Javion's heart skipped. "What is it?" The CEO's tone softened, but the words hit like a curveball. "You must issue a public statement forgiving your former teacher. A statement of reconciliation. Only then will the contract be finalized." Silence filled the room. The offer hung in midair, not just a scholarship, but a choice. Renee's hand left Javion's. She looked at her son, then at the CEO. "Forgive the teacher?" she asked, voice small but firm. The CEO nodded. "Yes, we believe progress sometimes comes from closure. We want this to be forward-looking, not bitterness-driven. We're investing in potential and image." Javion's chest felt tight. Did he want the scholarship enough to comply? Did he want to forgive someone who'd mocked, dismissed, humiliated him? The teacher whose authority had bullied his brilliance. The teacher who had stood by as he was labeled disruptive. He remembered the classroom, the mocking laughter, the phone recording, the video that exploded, the endless nights of doubt, the small circle of hope when Dr. Langston Maris believed him. And now this, a scholarship, a research position, his future rewired, but at the cost of his voice, his truth. The CEO added softly, "You're not admitting wrongdoing. You're just stating that you accept the journey, that you forgive the past and move into the future. It's symbolic, nothing more." Renee stood. "We need time," she said. The CEO nodded. "Of course, the offer is valid until the end of the week." Outside, the landscaped gardens glowed under twilight. Javion stared at the horizon. A future stretched wide, but a question loomed. Did taking this path mean relinquishing a piece of himself? On the return flight, Javion closed his eyes. He imagined the research lab, the fractional transforms, the vector model he'd uncovered. He saw his equation printed on published paper covers. He saw young black children watching him present on stage, saying, "If he can do it, so can I." But beneath the vision was a quieter one. The same classroom at Redwood High. The teacher's smirk, the laughter echoing in his memory. He wondered, could one statement in public erase that memory, or betray it? Back home, in the kitchen, Renee placed 2 mugs of tea in front of him. The walls held traces of their recent fear and fight. "This could be the break of your lifetime," she said. "But it's still your decision. I'll stand by you no matter what." Javion looked at her. the warmth in her eyes already brimming with tears. Thank you, Ma. He took a sip. I don't know yet if I'll accept it. She nodded. And that's okay. He exhaled, tasting the tea, but his mind was elsewhere. The next day, the news broke. Technova University signs Black teen math prodigy for full scholarship and research role. The headlines were celebratory. The press asked for interviews. How does it feel? Did you expect this? They didn't ask. Did you have to forgive to get it? The question hovered silently beneath. Overnight, social media posts applauded him, called him pioneer. Conservative outlets asked, is this tokenism? The divides stretched again. He was their symbol now, the subject of both hope and critique. He logged into the student portal of Technova. Scholarship confirmed. Research start date set. Orientation schedule posted. But there was one field still blank. Public statement of reconciliation. Pending. He scrolled and saw the condition written in fine print. Candidate must publish statement of forgiveness by date. The clause gleamed like a trap. Renee asked him that evening, are you ready to say it? Javion closed his laptop. I'll need to think about what forgiveness means. She leaned in. You don't have to say you won't forgive. You just have to say you are forgiving. He turned away. It sounds easy, but it doesn't feel right. She reached for his hand. Then don't do it half-heartedly. If you do it, own it. The room held its breath. Then came the twist. A voicemail from Dr. Maris. Javion. I heard the offer. Good. But I need you to promise one thing. Don't sign away your narrative. The forgiveness clause. They might use it to rewrite your story. Be wary. I'll send you a draft release that protects your authorship. But don't make the public statement till we secure that. Javion's heart sank. The scholarship was golden, but lined with rust. He looked at the contract again. The clause glowed. Statement of reconciliation. First author on paper. The scholarship. The future. The question at what cost. He closed his eyes and thought of the beginning. The teacher's smirk. The laugh. The recording. The video. He thought of the courtroom board. The whiteboard. The moment he wrote the final line. He thought of the moment when brilliance met punishment. And now the moment when brilliance met condition. The future was shimmering, but the price tag hadn't yet been attached. The offer is on the table. The scholarship confirmed. But the condition hangs heavy. He must publicly forgive the teacher. And now Javion must decide. Will he relinquish his voice, or reclaim his story? The studio lights were bright enough to burn, yet Javion felt cooler than he had in weeks. He sat across from the interviewer in the live broadcast set, chairs facing each other over a small table, the backdrop a muted blue with the station logo. Cameras rolled in slow whir. The producers had briefed him, you're here to speak your truth. But what truth? The humiliation, the laughter, the lawsuit, the equation, the conditional scholarship. All of it pressed into this one moment. The interviewer's voice was soft yet steady. Javion, thank you for joining us tonight. You've been through a remarkable journey from classroom scorn to courtroom demonstration, from viral mockery to national spotlight. When you first stood in that classroom and the teacher laughed at your solution, how did it feel? For a beat, Javion's mind flickered back to the moment, the marker poised on the board, his heart racing, the teacher's voice slicing through the silence. He remembered the click of the phone recording his reaction, the murmurs, the mocking laughter. He inhaled, exhaled. It felt, he said carefully, like being erased. The word came softly, but the studio hushed. I knew the answer was right. I knew I was right. But the room told me that being right wasn't enough. That I had to look right, act right, believe what they taught, not what I discovered. He paused. It's difficult when your mind gives you the answer, and the world tells you you can't speak it. Across the screen, the audience leaned in homes, on laptops. The pause felt like a crack in the narrative. The interviewer nodded. And now you've repeatedly proven them wrong. Your work has drawn national attention, legal fights, a global research offer. Yet the path hasn't been simple. How did you get here? Javion's voice strengthened. Because I refused to stay silent. I refused to let them define me. Because when I solved that problem differently, it wasn't just math, it was truth finding me. And truth doesn't always follow the rules they write for you. He looked away for a moment, then back. I think they were threatened. Because I solved it fast. Because I solved it clean. Because I look like the kid they didn't expect to do any of that. The phrase hung heavy. Some listeners nodded. Others didn't yet grasp the depth. The host leaned forward. You've also spoken of a forgiveness clause tied to your scholarship offer. Can you tell us about that decision? Javian exhaled slowly. Yes. I was offered a full ride, research position. And yes, they asked me to publicly forgive the teacher. It was tempting. A dream. But I asked myself, does forgiving mean goodbye to the rightful story? I realized I could forgive the person. Maybe one day. But not the erasure of the truth. And so I said, I will not stay silent in exchange for opportunity. There was a ripple across the studio. Cameras shifted. Viewers online paused playback. He looked calm, but inside the stakes were sky high. He continued, the world expects the talented black kid to thank the system that ignored him, to shake hands and move on. But what about acknowledgement? What about justice? My answer was, I would not accept silence as success. I wanted no. I deserve acknowledgement. I solved it, and they laughed. Then they sued me. Then they offered me silence disguised as advancement. I said, I stand for both truth and progress. His words were raw and measured, and the room held tight. The host nodded slowly. That's powerful. One last question. What do you hope the world sees now when they look at you? Javian looked directly into the camera. I hope they see a black teenager who did more than survive. I hope they see someone who redirected humiliation into purpose. I hope they see someone who learned that being corrected is one thing, being erased is another. And if you erase me, you erase possibility for others. The camera stayed on his face a moment longer than usual. The viewer count surged. Then came the twist. At the end of the broadcast, the screen split fed to another live feed, an auditorium in a neighboring state, where Mr. Connor, the teacher, was taking part in a panel on education trends and student innovation. As the host replayed Javion's statement live, the audience at the panel began to murmur. One former student stood up and held a microphone. Mr. Connor, she said. Her voice shook, but she was steady. You taught me algebra too. You told me I wasn't ready for honors. You told my black friend she was disrupting class when she solved ahead. Why did you laugh at Javion's solution? The teacher's face drained. The audience gasped. The live camera caught his response. Just a tight smile, a turning head. The public confrontation unfolded in real time, miles away, but tens of thousands watched. Back in the studio, the host turned to Javion. Seems justice is not just inside this studio. Javion leaned back and exhaled. He sensed the shift. The teacher's panel feed ended. The teacher left the stage abruptly. The host whispered, It appears Mr. Connor has exited the building. The live broadcast showed the teacher walking across the lobby, escorted by staff, head down. The camera captured one phrase from him. I meant to teach. The broadcast. The host turned back. Mr. Carter, what do you make of this moment? Javion's eyes glowed. I make this moment truth doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. The studio clapped softly. Social media exploded again. The hashtag day, what did he laugh at, peaked. Screens everywhere captured the teacher's exit. The student's declaration. The divide. Later that evening, Javion sat with Renee on the porch. The streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement. You were amazing today, she said. You changed something. He held the mug of tea and looked at the sky. Maybe. But it's not over. Not by a long shot. She reached for his hand. I know. The air felt cooler. The future seemed sharpened. Not soft with promise, but taut with expectation. Then his phone buzzed. Another interview request. Another round of commentary. Another wave. But underneath it all he sensed the real game. Recognition or erasure. Justice or silence. The teacher is confronted by his own former students on live TV, leaving both the classroom's legacy and Javion's future on the line. The auditorium was filled to capacity. Rows of engineers, scientists, educators, students and advocates sat shoulder to shoulder under the glow of stage lights. A massive screen behind the podium displayed the header of the paper, Carter Reduction Method, a new path in vector transformations. When Javion Carter stepped to the microphone in his suit and slightly oversized jacket, the applause was warm but measured. He had not arrived here by accident. Weeks earlier, the courtroom, the lawsuits, the scholarship offer with strings, each had forged this moment. Now the world watched him claim it. He began. Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Langston Maris, to my mother Renee, to those who believed before I was believed. This paper is published under my name. Every step, every shorthand, Every intuition is mine. The applause that followed was stronger now, built on recognition, not sympathy. He had made a decision. He would not publish as an anonymous contributor. He would not sign off or step aside. This was his work, his name, his story. On the screen the formula appeared, bold, centered, his handwriting scanned into clear font. Minimized redundancy, accelerated solution. The audience watched as he navigated through slides showing its implications. Faster algorithmic models, potential for data compression systems, applications in AI. Others had suggested he tone down the language. Let it be proof of concept, not revolution. But Javion didn't compromise. If it wasn't impactful, he said, I wouldn't present this. Because the problem wasn't just solving X, it was changing how we view problem solving. After the paper's immediate publication, the ripples were everywhere. Headlines read, Teens Formula Now in Journal of Applied Mathematics. Black Students Breakthrough Challenges STEM Standards. Educational podcast discussed him. What does it mean when the student becomes the innovator in the class? Graduate forums debated his method. A notable institution asked for licensing rights. Tech companies requested private briefings. The teacher who once laughed at him, Mr. Connor, was now defending his role. But it didn't change what Javion had done. At Redwood High School, the administration quietly placed his paper in the library archive. A librarian looked at the title, then placed it beside the standard textbooks. The contrast was telling. One book code-soaked, 9 years old. The other fresh, authored by a teenager who carried the insults of that same hall. Teachers passed by, some offering nods, some avoided eye contact. But the movement was underway. A new wave of students, especially black and brown students, were looking at his name and thinking, if he can, so can I. In his high school math class, the blackboard still bore his original equation. But something shifted. A plaque had been mounted beneath it. In honor of Javion Carter, innovation, integrity, inspiration. The teacher's voice had once cut him down. Now the same board pointed upward. The plaque's unveiling ceremony was subdued, attended by his mother, by Maris, by some of his former classmates. In that moment, when the ribbon fell and the camera clicked, a hush silent as recognition filled the room. The memory of the smirk, the laughter, the viral video, those were still there, but they no longer defined the space. Javion toured schools, spoke at conferences, and visited classrooms. In one Metro High School auditorium, he asked the students to raise their hands if they'd been told they weren't ready. Nearly every hand shot up. He smiled and said, "Then you are ready to redefine readiness." The applause echoed. For the first time he realized that his fight wasn't just for himself, it was for others who had been told not yet. He felt the weight of legacy rest gently on his shoulders, not as a burden, but as a pledge. At home one late evening, Renee looked across the kitchen table at her son. The house was quiet now, lights low. "You changed everything," she said softly. Javion stirred his tea. "I hope I changed something," he replied. "Not just for me, but for every kid who looks like me and walks into a class wondering if their voice matters." She reached across and took his hand. "It does." He gave a hesitant smile. Then he added, "And if it doesn't yet, they'll have to respect the proof." As the school year ended, Redwood High announced something unexpected. The math wing would be renamed Carter STEM Center. Students cheered. A black tie ceremony was planned. The principal gave a speech. "This is not just about one student's achievement. It's about transforming what we expect from every student." Javion watched from the back row, his mother beside him. The teacher, Connor, was there too, though his expression was unreadable. Applause washed over the name on the building's facade, and Javion felt something close to closure. But he also knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was a new chapter. There was an unexpected twist in the growth of his work. A tech startup led by two young engineers, one black, one Latina, contacted him and said they'd tested his reduction method and integrated it into their prototype for an AI-driven educational tool. The tool flagged student progress and helped identify when lesson paths could be collapsed into more efficient frameworks. The startup credited his method and asked him to be a co-founder. Javion hesitated. He realized that this step would merge his academic breakthrough with product, with real-world application. It meant decisions about equity, ownership, and future. Did he want to build a tool or a legacy? He chose both. Contracts were drawn. Equity shares assigned. He and his mother studied the print with legal counsel. The startup's headquarters buzzed with energy. When the final contract was signed, Javion stood next to the founders and held the first unit of the device they built, a touchscreen showing running code derived from his equation. It was surreal. That initial moment of being laughed at on a blackboard had become code in an educational tool aimed at leveling the playing field. And yet he carried the memory with him. Humiliation didn't feel like shame anymore. It felt like fuel. At the year's end, the National STEM Association presented him with the Emerging Innovator Award. The presenter called him a heavy hitter out of honors algebra 2. Javion accepted with gratitude, but thought of the classroom at Redwood High, of the teacher, of the silence that had followed him. He dedicated the award to those who were told their answers weren't welcome. That night, after the ceremony, he returned home and found a letter from the district's attorney. The lawsuit had been settled quietly. The terms were sealed and undisclosed. No public admission of wrongdoing. But buried in the settlement was a clause. The district agreed to overhaul its honors, math procedures, and review disciplinary policies for advanced track students of color. Javion read it slowly. He exhaled. The victory wasn't loud, but it was real. In the classroom where it all began, students filed through the doorway as usual. The plaque shone. Javion stepped in late one afternoon, walked past the rows of desks, and stood before the board one last time. He took a marker and added, "Today, it matters who gets to solve. Tomorrow, it matters who gets to lead." He stepped back. Faces turned. Some eyes widened. Some nodded. A girl with braids whispered to her friend. He turned and smiled at her. That smile was recognition. He left the room quietly, just like he entered, but now with purpose. Outside, his name was on the wall. His story was on the page. His equation was in print. But what felt most real was that his name was on the minds of those who believed, and on those who doubted, and on the ones watching for the next breakthrough. He looked ahead to the horizon of his freshman year in college, the startup's roadmap, the conference where he'd keynote, but he carried also the memory of being dismissed in that classroom. The duality was his strength. Now the world had to adjust. Now the school had to adjust. Now the narrative had to shift. And so the story returns to the same classroom, now renamed in his honor. And as the camera pans across the plaque, the screen fades. A young student enters, hesitates, picks up the chalk, and in that moment asks, "What if I'm next?" If you've ever been told to stay quiet when you were right, if you've ever watched brilliance get buried just because of the skin it came in, then you know this story isn't just his, it's ours. Type yes if you believe genius has no color. Subscribe if this broke your heart and opened your eyes.